Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Cool. All right. Well, it's another great day. And we're going to study fugue, which is also awesome. So what we can do is actually start using the flat.io page that I made for the fugue. If you guys remember, very early on, I created a fugue exposition flat.io document. I would start incorporating things on there so I can kind of get a sense for what you're doing. I know we talked about writing a subject, and if you haven't, we can kind of start writing fugue in class. I can show you some examples, and we can continue getting to the point where it gets to the three-part counterpoint section, etc. But I guess I can share my screen, and I'm recording this just for good measure. I actually recorded the last class, and I think I made a counterpoint playlist just in case it's useful to you guys. Because I know for whatever reason, sometimes can't be a class or something. But anyway, this should be a fun endeavor to write a fugue. I guess let's just review some of the stuff we talked about last time. And that is this. So yeah, so the fugue has an exposition in which the subject is announced in an imitative fashion according to a traditional pattern. And that's the part that we're actually really concerned with. And I guess if we were talking about the exposition in more detail, it would have this. It would basically have the statement of the subject. And then basically it would have, sorry, I guess you could say it would have the announcement of the subject in the first voice. And then after that, it would have the statement of the subject in the second voice, either a real answer or a tonal answer, accompanied by a counter subject in the first voice or a free counterpoint in the first voice. Okay, and then we have either, okay, I guess I should segment this even more. So it's either a real answer, either a real answer, or a tonal answer. And if it's a real answer, the subject is literally transposed up a fifth into the key area of the dominant. And if it's a tonal answer, the subject is transposed such that the fifths become fourths, and the key area is still the tonic. And I'll explain a little bit more of that. That's a confusing aspect, but it's really not that bad. It's just, it might take a second to sink in. Okay, so I guess this is the breakdown so far, and then after that we have the bridge.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is the difference between announcing a subject and stating a subject?
So that's just a semantics thing. Well, the reason I called it an announcement is because it's really, it's like the first time it appeared. But you could, yeah, I guess it doesn't make sense necessarily to announce it the second time, because it's already been announced the first time. So it's not really a difference. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we have the the subject in the first voice. Then we have the subject in the second voice. Then we have a bridge, and then we have the subject in the third voice. So this is let's see. Capture subject / free counterpoint in the other two voices. So this is actually the part that we're concerned with. Actually, there's one more part, which is episode, which basically brings you to the middle entry. But I think that I might not have you do this. Basically, then what happens in the middle entry is it's a freer, what happens in the middle section, which is part 2, is it's a freer portion, which generally avoids the tonic key. And there are situations where this subject still appears, and subject still manifested in a fragmented manner in different key areas. And then they are padded by episodes. So I guess I should explain what an episode is. An episode really is a sequential pattern. I guess I should say it's a harmonic sequence. And the purpose of it is to take you from one key area to another. Okay. Same thing here. It may or may not. The bridge may or may not be a harmonic sequence. So I guess I should say this. The bridge takes you from one key area to another, specifically the 5 to the 1. It may or may not be a sequence. So you might just do like a direct modulation from 5 to 1 or something. Or it might actually be a sequence. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here already. We talked about basically this stuff in the context of inventions, but it was really fast last time. So the idea is, let's see, let me find the appropriate slide really quickly. Okay, so this is the idea. I just want to emphasize. So really quickly, there are just really, I guess, 4 parts, A, B, and C, and D, that I'm going to require of you. You don't have to do part E. That's not that much, and remember, it's not a terrible amount of work, but it still requires some thinking. And you know, this is an example of like 8 measures that encapsulates A, B, C, and D. So in this particular example, there's a tonal answer, but I'll explain to you what that really is. What we have here is a real answer. We have the subject. Oh, I guess I need to connect my Ableton really quickly. Sorry. When I turn off my computer, my audio devices get mangled even though my software is still open. Broadcast. Can you hear that? Probably not. I need to unshare my screen and then share computer sound. Excuse me. You can hear that, right? Cool. So this is interesting. the distinction between a real answer and a tonal answer. So I want you to notice something. We're in the key of G major. Does the dominant note really appear in the subject? Meaning the note D, does it appear in the subject early on? It doesn't, right? It doesn't appear early on in the subject. So this is a very critical thing. And also it starts, yeah, obviously it doesn't start on the dominant note because that would basically contradict what you just said. It doesn't include the dominant note early on in the subject. This is really important. When you have a subject like this, it's a candidate for a real answer. So what we have here is this. And then this gets literally transposed over here to the key area of the 5. Right? That is a real answer. Okay? So you have the subject and then you have it literally transposed up a fifth. And the key area goes to the 5. Okay? And here's an important aspect. You alternate key areas. Like this first subject statement, or I guess the announcement of the subject is in the key area of the 1. Excuse me. The restatement of the subject in the second voice is in the key area of the 5. At some point, we'll get to that. In a real answer, it's in the key area of the 5 immediately. Okay? Tonal answer. A tonal answer, basically, so we're in the key of F major here. So the idea is, I guess I'll ask the same question. Does the note of the dominant appear very quickly in the subject? It does, right? You see it twice. We're in the key of F major. F is the tonic, C is the dominant, okay? So you see the C, and you see it appear early on in the subject. Now, here's why this necessitates a tonal answer. So, so ultimately, if you transpose this up a fifth, and you literally transpose this up a fifth, what you'll get in the answer is a G. So let's say, like, for whatever reason, when we harmonize this, this feels like a 5 at this particular moment. This is really the crux of this, okay? This might feel like a 5 at this particular moment harmonically. If we left this as a G, if this were a G, if this note were a G, it would feel like the 5 of 5 or supertonic. Okay? The reason that we have tonal answers is because of this exact fact that we want to avoid. We don't want to introduce the feeling of the supertonic or the 5 of 5 too soon. And that's might seem ridiculous that we go through all this effort to explain all of these details and disambiguate these things just for that reason, but it's really the reason. And it goes back to the medieval ages when, I remember a long time ago, we were talking about Dorine and hypodorine, and I was like, yeah, it's not that important. It turned out to be kind of important from the sense that they didn't want to emphasize a fifth above because it gave the impression, if you have a fifth in the melody and then you transpose that up a fifth, it gives the impression of going to a totally different key area. So that's why the idea between those medieval modes and the hypo modes was that instead of transposing up a fifth, from going from C to G, you would transpose up a fourth from C to F. So instead of going, which would basically bring you to the, I guess here's an interesting way of thinking about that. C to G is the bottom fifth of the C major scale. C to F is the top fourth of the C major scale. Whereas G to D, if we did a real literal tonal answer, well, this is a bad example. This is a good example. I'm not paying attention to the example here. So let me actually try this. F to C. C to F is the top fourth of the F major scale, right? This should make sense. F to C is the bottom fifth of the F major scale. C to F is the top fourth. If we actually did C to G, it feels like we're no longer in F major anymore. And we might even feel like we're going to G major. So this is the important thing to realize. So like this melody note C, it kind of like touches the dominant. So already we're kind of losing the sense of the tonic tonality by using this dominant note. We transpose this up a fifth, it could feel that much more removed from this tonic tonality. So that's why we change the C, we change the G to an F. Basically, we change the fifth to the fourth, okay? So does anyone have any questions about this? I've said what I need to say, it's just confusing. So essentially, you have a couple of choices. You might just decide to avoid having dominant notes in your fugue subject, so that you don't have to worry about this weird thing of having a tonal answer, right? You know, for instance, right here, this example is great because it doesn't include any dominant notes early on, so it just does a real answer. But there are so many great examples of counterpoint that includes the dominant note. For instance, right here, it includes the dominant note right here. Okay, so that's the dominant note. Now, when it gets answered, it's actually a tonal answer, because check this out. This is the D. The D is the fifth, right? I mean, what am I saying? It's early. The G is the fifth, right? In the key, in the C minor tonality. Now, if we transpose this literally, what would we get? This would be a D, right? So let me actually circle the note that was changed to kind of help you see this. To help you see this. Okay. So what you see here is a C, and this C was actually changed. This is really what makes it a tonal answer. If this was literally I guess notice the difference between this and this. This is a fourth in the fugue subject, and the fourth in the answer becomes a fifth, right? So this is sort of, can you guys see how that works? The fourth becomes a fifth. But notice how nothing else in the fugue changes. It's just at the very beginning of the subject, it kind of, it wants to still communicate the one key area. But by the end of the statement of the subject, it actually communicates the 5 key area, right? So can I move on, or does everyone get that? Space bar in, by the way, otherwise, or continue, hold down space bar, and so I'm gonna get my peanut gallery to fire up their videos again. Chaz doesn't have a webcam. Cool. So I'm looking at a bunch of blank screens. Okay, great. Awesome. Makes sense. I can move on. No questions? Okay, just make sure you hold space bar while you talk, otherwise I won't be able to hear you. And because I'm definitely not ignoring you. I have a tendency to like really address your questions right away, to the extent that I might even disrupt the flow of the presentation. So if you ask a question, I'll definitely answer it. So please ask a question. Or at least I'll try to answer it. Okay. So, great. So we have the subject, we have the statement of the subject in the second voice. It could be a real answer or it can be a tonal answer. And I guess I'll add this information right here. It begins, a real answer begins in the dominant key area, excuse me, right away. The tonal answer begins in the tonic key area by virtue of the fact that the fifth becomes the fourth, or the fourth becomes the fifth. But by the end of it, the statement, it is in the dominant key area. Okay? Ooh, this is a little confusing to unwrap. Either yeah, okay. It could be, I guess I'll write nature of answer. Nature of counter subject. Nature of accompanying counterpoint. So as I said, you could be accompanied by a counter subject or a free counterpoint. Okay. So let's take a look at that. In fact, I would encourage you guys to use a counter subject because it actually will make your lives easier. Because once you've written the counter subject, you can just reuse the counter subject and just tweak it slightly at the second entrance. Or I guess at the third entrance, because the counter subject might not appear. Counter subject won't appear like again until the third statement. So let's take a look at this. So what we have is we have da 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 da. Great, and that's counter subject one. Excuse me. And then okay, and then we basically have counter subject one again. Ba da 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 ba da da da. Okay, and then what it does, because you see this, right? You see this counter subject over here that's labeled counter subject one. Whoops. Right? But now when you see counter subject one, all you have to do really is you have to get into three voice counterpoint. And since it's not that difficult to do from the standpoint that at this point, where I mean, you have a better understanding of how counterpoint and harmony relate to each other because you've had to actually do a harmonic analysis on specific points, literally. So the result is you just have to flesh out the harmony a little bit more. But I'm going to, as time goes by, you know, we have 6 more classes, I guess, including the final, maybe. So we'll talk more about 3 voice strategies, but that is basically the gist of it. And I guess the other thing that I haven't really explained, and some of this stuff I also put the Dutto explanation over here as well. Okay. I guess another thing that is worth mentioning is subjects and answers may be aided in flowing into another with the use of a link. So there might be a little bit of tail material at the subject to help the subject flow into the answer. So don't feel like you just have to jump right away into the next section. So, okay, I guess another thing that's useful is actually contained in the Dutto. There's some interesting sequencing exercises. So one sec. So everyone open up your flat.io and start writing your subjects, if you haven't already. How many of you have already started writing your subjects? You have? Cool. All right. You have? Okay. So start putting it in flat.io. And then the next thing I guess I'm going to talk about is sequencing. And while you're opening up your flat.io, I'm going to pull up a sequencing worksheet that I got from the Dodo. Okay. Excuse me. Sequencing desktop. Okay. 1 second. Insert. Oh, I just realized I stopped sharing my screen, but you guys are opening your documents anyway, so it's okay. All right. Okay, so there's some juicy stuff in here regarding sequencing. And I guess what's useful about some of these sequencing scenarios is that, well, some of these are useful, but I think actually a really useful thing is to modulate from the 5 to the 1. So there's actually a page that in the Dodo that pertains to this, but for some reason I've lost it. I think it's this one right here. Ascending and descending fifth sequences. This is a useful thing to look at. And really, the thing that's really most salient to what we're going to do is probably the descending fifth sequence. So let's see. You could use this. You could use the idea of sequencing to get you from one key area to the next, and then you could use some chromatic notes to somehow fudge yourself all the way to the final key area. So let me actually open up your flat.io and see if you guys are doing anything interesting. Let's see. So I think a good goal by next class would be to have your fugue subject and your counter subject written. I think that's a reasonable goal, right? You have your subject and your counter subject, and basically your counter subject is just fleshing out the subject with free counterpoint, right? And then we can continue to look into how you sequence, because I mean that's the real essence of what you have to do, and ultimately you have to make sure that your counter subject and the second statement of your subject end in the fifth key area, the key area of 5. That's the only sensible thing you can do. You could just have it begin at the 5 if you have a real answer. But if you do that, you've done most of the work. Then after that, you just have to have a sequence, and then you just restate the subject with 3-voice counterpoint in the 3rd voice. So I think that's a reasonable expectation. So have that, I'm having incremental homework assignments. So you don't have to submit this and export this, but do this so that I can look at this and check if you've done it okay. So by Monday, it's for your own sake. So let's see, maybe I can look at someone's work. Griffin had mentioned that he had done something.
I started, but I was confused with the form and that, so I need to work on it more.
Okay. Griffin, I feel like you are you've been in the 16th century mindset or sorry, 18th century mindset for some time, from the standpoint that your motet had some 18th century sounds to it to some degree, because there's some sequencing.
Yeah.
So I think this style will suit you very well. I also think I remember Kaylee mentioning that she had started. I don't know if she did it on flat.
Yeah, I did it under the fugue section, but I have no clue what I'm doing at this point.
Okay, let's take a look. Kaylee, 405B fugue. So just remember, just to refresh, I mean, while this page is refreshing, a subject, there are different ways you can write a subject. You can write a 2-measure subject, which is called a soggetto. You can write a longer subject, which I don't recommend you doing, andamento. You know, a 4-bar subject might be the sweet spot.
Yeah, I did a 2-measure subject.
Okay. Ba, 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 ba. Okay. Oh, okay. So actually, you started on the dominant. So what you have to do is actually, you have to do a tonal answer. Because what happens is, when you start on the dominant, and you transpose, so this kind of, I wish I could annotate on your screen. I don't know how to
No, I
use it.
started on the tonic. I started on C.
But that doesn't sound like it, because
Right?
you have B flat. So it seems like you're an F major. And actually, this isn't, if you're an F major, this is also not convincing, because you don't have this, you don't have the F at all. So
I originally had it start on E, and then everything was the same, just transposed down, starting on E. But then I don't know why I moved it up to C. And I ended up with it.
You know, it's funny though. I guess we have to make. So I'm glad we opened this one. Some melodies kind of give the impression that that you're not in the tonic key area. So, like, you know, for instance, the Bach melody really did it. So I'll show you an example. Like, if you jump down, I've noticed on these particular examples. For instance, the Bach starts and it goes stepwise. It doesn't jump to the median. The mediant or the submediant. I always get those two confused. Submediant is the 6th, I think. Am I correct in saying that? Either way, if you jump to the 6th scale degree, that's not a very common thing. If you jump up to the 3rd scale degree, you're emphasizing the major 3rd in that key, or the minor 3rd in that key. In this example, so I would define your fugue melodies just by looking at the examples, with notes that have like major 3rds or to start or something, or a major 2nd is climbing up the scale instead of jumping down the scale. Or, you know, in this Bach example, it goes from the note to the leading tone, back to the note, right? It goes from the tonic note to the leading tone note. You could jump to the median, but I would somehow, in 2 measures, my worry is that you're not gonna, you have to really seal the deal that this is in tonic. Otherwise, it could be ambiguous and it might feel like it's in a dominant. So that's the case for making a longer fugue melody. So I would rework this somehow, either making this longer and having the F appear somewhere. Ba 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 da 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 da. Something like that, where you just have, you still da da, but then you somehow go to the F, da da da. And then what you'd have to do here is, this is great if you want to do this, but I don't know what you want to do. You might want to start. I don't actually know what direction you want to take this. Where are you thinking you're going to take this, Kaylee?
I didn't have any thinking. I was just writing.
Okay, but I mean, the reason I brought that up is because you said that you transposed this, and it originally didn't have an accidental, and it was.
That was because when I started writing the second part, it just didn't sound right and it didn't fit together right.
Okay, so how about, okay, so here's the thing. I think it actually is a cool melody to have an F major. So a result of that is, I think, I'm adding more work to you. I think just expanding this a little bit, like another measure. da 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 da, and then I would maybe go to the F very quickly, like maybe like the shortcut to make this. Oh, I'm sorry. Just so you state the F somewhere, and then you could add another measure, ba 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 da 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 dum, ba da 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 ba, or something like that. You know what I mean? So insert another measure, and then this would have to start on F, because remember, if we're in the key of, I guess you could also add a key signature since I'm sort of jurisdicting this for you right now, but if
That's fine. You can just keep writing as much as you want. I won't
okay.
complain.
All right. So I actually don't know how to add a new measure. So maybe you could add a new measure between the second measure and the third measure. And then I guess an important thing to remember is that. So yeah, why don't you add that measure right now, and then I'll just keep explaining stuff in the meantime. So an important thing about this measure, the reason it needs to be a tonal answer, is because this C is the fifth of F major, right? Now, this G, if you go up a fifth above C and you get to a G, it feels like we're in the fifth of the fifth, which is precisely what we don't want. So this is a great example of why you would use a tonal answer. And you would just change this to an F, okay? Now here's something else to keep in mind. The first part is an F major. The second part eventually needs to finish in C major. So ba 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 da 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 da. You need to eventually finish this in C major. So all that might need to be done is here's a strategy for actually doing a tonal answer. Okay? The strategy is this. You literally copy the answer up a fifth, and then all you do is you change all the fifths to fourths at the beginning, right? Because get this, if you're in C major, I guess I can do my own right now while Kaylee's working on hers. So let's say you have something like this. I don't know if you can hear this, probably not. So then, da 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 da. And then if I did this, and I literally took this subject, this is the subject right here, and I literally transposed this. Whoa. This is literally, okay. I'm going to transpose this literally by doing, I think I have a keyboard shortcut for this. Okay. And now we're actually in C major. Okay. Now this is a real answer. And then this is a real answer, but it doesn't work. Okay, and the reason it doesn't work is because what you have here is, gosh, sorry. What you have here is the following. You have a 5. It kind of feels like you're in the 5 key area right here. But what you have here is you have the following. I love saying the following while I figure out what I'm going to write. Okay, I learned that from one of my teachers. 5 of 5. So that's why it's bad. The suggesting of the supertonic here is not ideal. Okay? So there's a quick and easy fix. I literally transpose this. The subject up a fifth. Okay? So the simple and dirty fix is to do this, is to do the following. Oh no, that's not the right shortcut. That's a shortcut, great. Okay. So this is the same thing. All I have to do is change the fifths at the outset to fourths. Okay? All I did was change the fifths at the beginning to fourths. And this is already this is basically half of what you have to do. And then you have to add a counterpoint right here. And all I did was just copy and paste. And I changed some fifths. And this, again, this is the tonal answer. If you did the real answer and you didn't have a lot of dominance right here, you would literally be done. You would be done with you'd be done with the real answer because you wouldn't have this 5 of 5 problem, right? Is this making sense?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And so sometimes, you know, for me, I like having that extra. This is similar. This is actually a variation on Kaylee's melody. And yeah, sometimes it feels nicer to have some extra bars to work with. You might actually be struggling to just use 2 bars because you can't communicate the harmony as well. So for me, I was like, okay, it's not like I'm, you know, like I like doing the minimal work as well, but you're not actually helping yourself by having 2 bars. You're just making it harder for yourself, I think, because the copy and paste operation will be difficult. And then so solution to avoiding the supertonic. Okay. So
it's basically going from 5 to 1.
It's actually the key area is actually it's going from the key area of the 1 to the 5. This note, okay, that's an important thing to realize. Okay, so actually let me put the key signatures in. So we're in F major, right? I should get rid of this 5 and write this note. 5 note is suggested by this note. Okay, so meaning right here, sorry that there's so many, like, I don't know how to, like, once I export this, all these like weird things will go away, but sorry that it's like red and alarming looking. I guess it is alarming looking, but it should be alarming. Yeah, 5 is suggested by this note, but we're still in F major. Okay? That's an important distinction. Now here, I guess I should say 5 of 5, oh gosh, is suggested by this note, but we are in C major. It just doesn't work well. Okay? So the way to make this work better is to change the fifths at the beginning to fourths. Okay? And then basically you want to somehow have the third entrance be in, and we'll talk about that next class, just the sequencing. But this is most of the work right here, believe it or not, because the sequence is going to be a hard thing to rack your brain against, but then you just restate the subject back in the 1. So it's basically copying and pasting this again for the last part, and then just using the counterpoint that you developed here and just transposing it, and then adding extra notes, and you're done. So not so bad. Let me actually save this. I think this might be worth saving. Fugue, tonal answer for a fugue. And actually, let me just export this. Tonal answer for a fugue. And then I'll do this in here. Export. And then when I go to the OneNote, tonal answer for a fugue. And I'll do a printout, blah, blah, blah. This is scintillating stuff to see this. Where did I put it? 405B. Okay. Voila. So let me take a look at some other, I take it some of you guys are working diligently on your fugue subjects. So by Monday, make sure you have your fugue and your fugue subject and your counter subject. We're going to look at your fugue subjects. In fact, what I'll do is actually, can you do me a favor? Can you actually, if I make an assignment, please, I think it'll be easier for me. Make the subject and counter subject, export the PDF of what you have so far. I'll put an assignment on Blackboard and just actually turn it into me by, how long, can you guys finish this by tomorrow night? No? Okay. Well, it's for most, okay, for those, how many of you think you can finish this by tomorrow night? Just raise your hand on your screen. Just a few.
Like the whole few?
No, just the answer,
Oh.
no, just the subject and the counter, just the subject and the restatement of the subject. The reason I'm asking you to do this by tomorrow is so I can grade it and give you feedback before Monday. So before tomorrow, I mean, it's like an hour. It'll take like an hour probably or less. So just do it as soon as you can so that I can grade it. And what I'm gonna ask you to do is actually export this as a PDF. I'll create an assignment. This way I can comment. It's really obnoxious for me to comment directly on this. It's hard for me to do that. So that way I can give you feedback. Well, actually, is it obnoxious for me to comment? Isn't there a comment function here? There is a comment box.
Question.
Yeah.
What meter are we supposed to use? Can we use 4.4 and 6.8, or does it have to be 4.4?
It doesn't have to be 4.4. You can use 6.8. We've never really studied counterpoint in those, or how to flesh out counterpoint, but there's loads of examples, and you can definitely use 6.8. I guess I have to make an executive decision. Griffin, you're familiar with comment boxes, right? I've seen you use them. How do you access that functionality?
Wait, with what?
Within.
Go to text, and it should all be there. It's under annotation, I think.
It's under.
Text.
Is it? Am I
No, right?
It's the fourth one.
Right there.
Oh, annotation. Okay, actually, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you don't have to export this. I'll just annotate directly onto your documents. Whatever I get to, whatever you finish, try to finish this by tomorrow night so that when I'm looking at this on Sunday, probably late at night, I'll be able to give you feedback, and whatever I don't give you feedback on, we'll proceed forward on Monday. But I think it's a good thing to try to finish today or tomorrow, because if you get this right, everything else will be right. But if you get this wrong, you'll have to make more changes later, if that makes sense. Okay, are you guys feeling more at ease about this? Hopefully. It'll be fun. So anyway, I guess I'll put like a link to the YouTube playlist on the OneNote. Like I'll put it over here or something in case it's useful for you. And you can kind of check this out, or just look at the notes, or just study Bach, or just play the entire Well-Tempered Clavier while you sleep. And great. All right, class. If you have any other questions, I'll stick around. And I know IVE, we were supposed to talk. So let me stop recording, because I always have a tendency of saying illegal stuff right after class ends. Like, oh, download this or download that, and I should stop recording.